Hi! So, I don't know if you can hear me. I really hope you can because I'm a lot further away from the camera. I have a new lens, so I don't know if you can tell if I'm more HD or whatever, but guess what I'm here for today? I'm finally going to do the Dan and Phil Synastry video that everyone has been asking me for. Once again, a bit of a disclaimer, Synastry is definitely not easy and neither am I very good at it. But I'm going to give it a go, and if anyone has alternative interpretations, please leave them in the comments so that we can help each other out. But yeah, I have both Dan and Phil's charts superimposed on top of each other, and I'm going to go through how they influence each other in each of their houses. In Synastry, you always have to kind of start with one person. So in this case, Dan's ascendant is on the far left of the chart, but that doesn't really matter ultimately. What matters is where the houses intersect. This is really, it's going to be so hard to do, but I'm going to give it a go. If you don't know somebody's birth time, the chart that you generate will always start with Aries as the ascendant. So don't get too confused in that it starts with the Cancer ascendant. That's because I inputted Dan's information first. Now I'm going to show you what I'm looking at right now, right here. That's hella confusing, right? I don't know why, but although I love cafe astrology, their Synastry is very confusing, and frankly, I don't think it's very easy to read. Ultimately, I'm going to be going through this one just because it's the easiest to generate, and the website I know the most. So sorry it's really confusing looking. So on the inside of the chart are Dan's planets, and on the outside are Phil's planets. So Dan's Mars, Venus and Jupiter, if I get any of this wrong, please tell me in the comments, are in Phil's 8th house. Now that, my friends, is interesting. Each of the houses, even if they're not in that sign, represent one of the signs in the zodiac. The 8th house is represented by Scorpio, and Scorpio is a secretive, dark sign. It's odd that Dan's Mars, which is his drive, his Venus, which is what he's attracted to, and his Jupiter fall in Phil's 8th house, because that could symbolise that there is some very deep and dramatic connection there. Cool, I'm going on astrolibrary.org. Venus in the 8th house Synastry overlay. I realise you could just do this and look it up on the internet. I'm sorry, If Dan's Venus is in Phil's 8th house, you're captivated by your partner. He feels completely subjugated and you give in to all their impulses for pleasure. At the same time, you don't try to run away. You're enthralled at their requests and you have a gut feeling that it can lead you to experience the deepest, darkest pleasure you could ever imagine. You find the house person very sexually attractive and you willingly make yourself available to them. They dream of doing things that they perhaps would never even consider in other relationships. Sexual tension will be always noticeable. I didn't want to launch into this with sex, but that's what's happened. Since this is the 8th house, your involvement with each other will transform the both of you. The transformation process can be utterly painful, but it produces a new and improved you. Apparently it's a foolproof indicator of mutual chemistry if your Mars is in the other person's 8th house. The 8th house person may even become obsessed, so watch out, this is definitely not a Synastry aspect for the faint-hearted. Then Jupiter, which is the planet of expansion and happiness. I've been through all this before. It's the planet of pleasure. I'm trying to remember the god that I always associate it with. An easy way to remember the different signs and houses is to remember that certain gods represent each one. So like Venus is Venus, the goddess. So she's all like beauty and stuff. Mars is the planet of drive because Mars was all about violence and war. Dan's Jupiter in Phil's 8th house is yet another powerful placement. Jupiter's ability to break down limits and lighten a house is quite beneficial here. Jupiter can make what sometimes feels like heavy obligations of giving and taking feel more optional and free. Just beware of Jupiter's tendency, i.e. Dan's tendency, to take things for granted. Don't assume that your partner's giving will continue forever without you ever being required to give back. Next, Dan's Pluto, the planet of immense changes. Scorpio's planet. It falls in Phil's 11th house, so... A very useful website for this, by the way, is southfloridaastrologer.com. That's what I'm using. I'll link it in the description, because this is really helping me out. Okay, it's not going to help me, but I'm guessing if Pluto is in Phil's 11th house, being in the 11th house, which is the house of other people and kind of the world more broadly, one-to-one acquaintances, that implies that Dan brings a lot of drama into that aspect of Phil's life, and there might be some friendship rifts going on. Dan's Neptune and Uranus are both in Phil's 2nd house, the house of possessions and material belongings. Uranus, which is Aquarius's planet, that's all about innovation and forward thinking, but it's quite intellectual. Maybe Dan introduces Phil to a whole new way of spending money and branding. I mean, they're a double act. They're a brand, and the fact that the 2nd house is about material things and spending money, and the fact that Uranus is there implies that there's some innovation going on there. Neptune is the planet of Pisces, so it's very idealistic and dreamy, and having it in the 2nd house of Phil's maybe implies that Dan brings a certain idealism to Phil's way of thinking about possessions. I know that Dan is very into collecting things that he cherishes and particular material objects, and their house is so Neptune in the 2nd house. It's full of and I mean their new house as well, it's full of memories, beautiful things that aren't necessarily ostentatious, they're just them. Saturn is actually the planet of restrictions and rules and regulations. It's Capricorn's planet. It's very law and, black and white, not a lot of feeling involved. I wouldn't necessarily say it's a negative planet. Sometimes it's a negative placement. So I'm not dissing Capricorn/Saturnite people. It says on this website, if you are a carefree spender, and your partner's Saturn, that's Dan's Saturn, falls in your 2nd house, Phil's 2nd house, you may feel that their seriousness about saving money for hard times weighs you down. So maybe Dan's got a more save up way of thinking. That doesn't seem entirely accurate to me, but that's kind of what the reading of that would be if Saturn was in your 2nd house. Interestingly, Dan's moon falls in Phil's 6th house. I don't know what that could possibly mean, because the 6th house is about health and routine, and having your moon there means that it's going to be an emotional health or routine. Apparently, if you have basically any planet there, it helps get things done. If Dan's moon falls into the 6th house of Phil's chart, the love may really bloom. You'll definitely feel like your partner is taking care of you in this area, and like I said, if you really need it, it can be a lifesaver. You will certainly feel loved. Dan's moon brings emotional stability to the health of the relationship and the routine of the relationship, and he probably nurtures Phil quite a lot in matters to do with life and organising and regulations. So Dan's Sun and Mercury fall in Phil's 7th house, which I think is super interesting, because the 7th house is about relationships. Mostly romantic, but also, close relationships, people you get on with well. And the fact that Dan's Sun and Mercury are there, so your Sun is your ego and your Mercury is the way you talk, it's in Phil's 7th house, so Phil's immediately going to feel a connection with them on a partnership level. If your partner's Sun, Dan's Sun, falls in the 7th house of Phil's chart, the relationship will be invigorating. The relationship will make you feel more alive. This is an excellent placement. You will enjoy being with your partner more than not being with them. There will be a natural attraction on a level that cannot be explained. Mercury in the 7th house of the Synastry chart is also beneficial. It can lighten the relationship and assist in communication, making it more free-flowing and easy. They often end each other's sentences, and it's hilarious. But don't let Mercury enlighten and intellectualize things to the point where the relationship loses the rules and boundaries that keep it solid. Mercury is a good placement here in the 7th house because it encourages free-flowing communication. Apparently Dan does. I wouldn't say he lightens things, but often he kind of puts an intellectual slant on things, can kind of deaden that conversation and make the relationship seem a bit dull. So maybe It's saying, you know, Dan provides emotional nurturance, but he's not as good at conveying this. Those are all the planets of Dan's in Phil's chart, so I'm now going to do Phil's planets in Dan's chart and how Phil affects Dan's life. So Phil's Saturn, Venus and Uranus in Dan's 6th house. Interesting. Venus, i.e. Phil, may make daily chores feel like they're not so bad after all. Venus can make you realise that a cup of coffee and some music help the work get done without so much suffering on your part. That's what Phil offers Dan. You know, he lightens the workload and the boring things that you have to do in life. Your partner's Saturn can actually really help here because it lends a discipline that you may need. Of course, this can also just be annoying. If your partner's planets, i.e. Phil's planets, falling in Dan's 6th house and Phil isn't particularly into health and fitness, that's probably going to affect Dan as well, so that's a bit true. They do like their comfort foods and their baking and stuff. Uranus in the 6th house. Again, the planet of innovation. I'm guessing that Phil invigorates Dan's way of looking at health. Phil often kind of talks about being stronger. I don't know if he goes to the gym or anything, but that's probably, you know, he's trying to shake up the health regime that him and Dan are in sometimes and be a bit healthier. He's not drinking milk anymore because he's lactose intolerant, and that's probably introduced a new element into their life. So it's all about innovating their 6th house needs. Oh, and Phil's Neptune is also in Dan's 6th house, so that adds a kind of dreamy idealism to the aspects of health. There's a bit of blurred boundaries here. I do remember that time they both went running though. That's probably Phil's idea, wasn't it? I don't know. According to this chart reading, it would have been Phil's idea. Okay, Phil's Sun is in Dan's 8th house. Ooh, interesting. Your partner's Sun in the 8th house is a powerful placement. The act of giving and taking in your relationship will make you both feel more alive and powerful. Your partner, Phil, will want to give to you and sacrifice for you. You'll feel a deep attraction and desire to please one another. Yeah, there's a deep attraction here, and it's a very strong, lasting one. Bit unstable, but there might be a few arguments, but Phil's Moon and Mercury are in Dan's 9th house. The 9th house is to do with travel and experiencing the world. The fact that Phil's Moon, which is his emotions, and his Mercury, which is the way he speaks, are in the 9th house means that there's going to be emotional undertakings and maybe conversing with different people around the world. Your partner's Moon in the 9th house will make you feel more comfortable in the larger world. Oh, so Phil makes Dan feel more comfortable. That's really true. Oh my god. You may be more confident in your ability to go out and conquer your more worldly goals when you're with your partner. You may feel that your partner puts you at ease in the world at large, and you'll feel more comfortable tackling the adventures the world has to offer. That's so weird! You may find yourself more interested in learning about other cultures, philosophies, or religions as a result of Phil's influence. I think that's so true. Like, Phil's really interested in Japan culture, and I don't think Dan was as interested till Phil came along. Okay, Phil's Jupiter is in Dan's midheaven. Ooh, interesting. I.e. the 10th house. Phil's Jupiter in Dan's 10th house will expand your horizons in the areas of career and your public image. You'll feel that the sky is the limit as far as what you can achieve, and it will simply feel easier. Jupiter is a way of opening up opportunities and adding an ease in the house in which it falls. The 10th house, which is career and the ultimate top of the chart, so it's the wide world and horizons. Jupiter's opening that up for Dan. Phil's opening that up for Dan, particularly in the areas of career and public image. So Phil's Mars, i.e. his energy, falls in Dan's 11th house. Interpersonal communication with the wide world, one-to-one relationships, people in the wide world. And it says, Mars here will certainly give you, i.e. Dan, more confidence and assertiveness when dealing with groups of people or organisations. You'll be more likely to be a group leader than a follower, with the power of your partner's Mars in your 11th house. Phil pushes Dan out of his comfort zone with people, and I think that's so true. If you see any kind of vlog footage of Dan and Phil, I don't know why I'm migrating over here, I'm so sorry about that. If you see any vlog footage with Dan and Phil combined, Phil's always the one who's kind of interacting with the group and bringing Dan into that fold of the group, something Dan probably really appreciates considering he has, you know, anxieties about people and stuff. I get to this point every time I do a Synastry reading, it confuses the heck out of me, particularly this way of laying it out. No, I did it right, I just didn't start at the beginning of Dan's houses for some reason. So Pluto falls in Dan's 5th house. Phil introduces an element of transformation in Dan's pleasure activities because Pluto is about transformation and about fighting and striving. So being in the 5th house probably means that Phil introduces an element of danger maybe to like the way they experience pleasure, whether, you know, that's food, drink, games, activities. I'm also going to do quickly what the bottom of the chart says. It's to do with planet interactions, which I'm very bad at. So I'm just going to read out what the website says, like I did with the other stuff. So Dan's Sun is trine Phil's moon. This is a positive aspect. This is likely to be a significant relationship. There is a strong feeling of belonging to one another for better or for worse that keeps the two together. It's an excellent aspect for a union. They're made to go well together, to understand, appreciate, love and complement each other. And Dan's Sun is trine Phil's Mercury. Trines are triangles, that's why they're called tri. Anyway, basically means that they're both air signs. So this is to do with their Aquarian and Geminian. They are able to solve problems when they put their heads together, respect for each other's intelligence, good understanding between the two persons and intellectual interests in common, similar or harmonious type of curiosity. What's quite interesting is that they always offer, once all the negative and positive aspects kind of counteract, there's a final score, and I don't know how to read this. I feel like if it's a higher score maybe you get along better with as a whole, but theirs ends up as 58, which is quite low because it's 910 minus 852, so you'd understand if you looked at the website, but basically I think that means that they've got quite a lot of negative as well as positive. But, you know, maybe that's a good thing, maybe that kind of brings out balance in some way. So Dan's Sun is opposing Phil's Mars. Here is a couple that may have frequent disputes as they may find it difficult to speak calmly. They might too frequently adopt an aggressive, defensive or offensive stance with one another. Conflict is caused if they both want to dominate the other and if they do not consciously attempt to relate on the basis of mutual understanding. One may lay down the law, give orders and make decisions, and the other may be an independent type who cannot stand being limited taking orders, the more so from the partner. I'm going to not read all of them because it's going to take forever. Another negative aspect is that Dan's moon is square Phil's Pluto, so there's a great physical or emotional attraction. Passion is sometimes uncontrolled, with possible possessiveness, jealousy, or emotional suffocation. They must learn to let go sometimes, to allow the other some space without worry. If this relationship ends, it can be very difficult to get over this relationship, if it is possible to get over it, as one or both feel burned by the other. Dan's Sun is opposing, which is the furthest you can get in the chart, away from Phil's Jupiter. So while they get on well when they first meet, sharing the same ideas and tastes, with the years their ideas change and they do not develop in the same way. They will no longer understand each other and could split up because they no longer love each other or have nothing more in common. I definitely think Dan and Phil have changed a lot over the years, and I feel like their dynamic has hardened at the same time that they've become very individual people. They're very much their own characters nowadays, but they still make it work, you know. It doesn't say they will break up with this, it just says that they're going to be developing in different paths. Dan's Mars is square Phil's Neptune. It's too easy for this relationship to end up becoming manipulative and frustrating. You may find that you have a hard time accomplishing much on a practical level when you are together because you tend to enjoy spending leisure time together. A difficult union that can succeed but could involve some distancing and dishonesty. Be very careful to be honest with each other, as deceptions have a way of coming to the light and great disappointments are possible as a result. Lastly, to end on a more positive note, Dan's Sun is conjunct Phil's Saturn, so here is this couple you can call stable. Remember, Saturn's about laws and things like that. They will lead their life together quietly, with friendship slowly replacing love. Saturn will dominate the Sun, so Phil, as is only natural, but the Sun may find this difficult to accept. In any case, as the Sun likes to feel secure, Saturn is a perfect partner. Overall, I think there was a sort of emphasis on Phil influencing Dan's social life in a positive way, and also maybe laying down a few laws. He's got quite a strong few Saturn influences on Dan's chart, and Dan tends to be a lot more of an emotional nurturer of Phil, and there's a lot of 8th house stuff going on, so he feels very deeply attracted to Phil at the same time. Dan also kind of helps Phil with a material way of living and appreciating memories and souvenirs and things like that, because there was a lot of 2nd house stuff as well. I'm sorry I'm kind of hunched, I'm not used to this new lens yet. Synastry is a tricky business. It truly is. I applaud anyone that can do it easier than I can, because you're amazing. I'm not going to tell you to subscribe, because do whatever the hell you want, but thanks for watching, and thanks for watching my other 2 Dan and Phil videos. I promise I wasn't doing it to pander to a Dan and Phil audience. I genuinely am really interested in astrology, and there were no chart readings of them on the website, so I thought I'd contribute my own. Goodbye, friends. I have to hunch because I haven't got a tall enough tripod.